Task-based learning, components of task-based learning. Task-based learning is a teaching method that focuses on the brain's strengths. There are differences of opinions about task-based learning, but let's look at some of the key components. First, tasks, by definition, involve active learning, which usually occurs in pairs or small groups. They also create a much more learner-centered classroom. Instead of the students sitting in seats and receiving knowledge from the teacher, which is very brain unfriendly, students take what they've just learned and do something meaningful with it. The brain retains more when more parts of the brain are activated at the same time. Tasks involve physical movement, social interaction, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. With all of these areas of the brain activated, the learner is able to learn faster and deeper than just through listening passively. The integration of skills also mimics real life instead of the constant separation of skills that often happens in classrooms. Since our brains are meaning makers, they thrive on integration and synthesis. Second, task-based learning is really a process of tasks, not just one task. At a minimum, it requires a pre-task, task, and post-task approach, but it might be better to think of it as a task chain. The idea of a task chain is that each stage of the task is scaffolded to provide support for the next task so that there's a task dependency. The various parts of the task chain build up upon each other. That means a teacher looks at the final product and language content of the task and then breaks it down into smaller pieces that gradually become more difficult. At the beginning of the semester, the task chain may be longer because the scaffolds are set closer together. But as learners improve, the task chain can become shorter because the students need less support. The brain loves this task dependency because it loves making connections. In fact, the more connections it can make, the more it retains. This process of combining task chains also means that information is recycled or spiraled in a natural way. Learners get to repeat and use the language in meaningful ways. Third, task-based language focuses on meaning. Many authors interpret this as authentic language, which is true most of the time. But whether the language is truly authentic or not, the task chain emphasizes language in a meaningful way. Research shows that language learners can acquire language just as easily, or better, by using the language to do something, rather than just focusing on the language for language's sake. For example, tasks allow the brain to concentrate on the goal of creating a class newsletter. Clearly, lots of language will be used in the making of the newsletter, but that's not where the brain's focus will be. The language has a greater chance of becoming automatic in this type of setting. That does not mean to never introduce grammar or vocabulary. It just means that those are considered supplementary tools that the student needs to successfully accomplish this particular task. Fourth, task-based learning is essentially creative learning. At its minimum, it means that students are not expected to just reproduce language structures learned in class. They are asked to synthesize everything they know in order to create something new. If the students can copy a pattern from the textbook to accomplish the so-called task, then it's not a true task. It should require something original to be produced. Practice and repetition can make certain skills more automatic in the brain, but when the brain needs to come up with something original, it's forced to search for and make more connections. The fifth and final point I want to make is that task-based learning allows for reflection. This usually happens in a post-task step. Learners should look at how and what they learned and discuss ways to improve the process, or discuss other ways they can use their new knowledge. This talking about learning step is often omitted, but our brains usually need a chance to step back and look at the process of learning that just occurred. Teachers often think that this reflection step happens naturally, but in the average student it doesn't. They usually need help to objectively analyze what just happened. In review, task-based learning is active and social, a series of tasks carefully scaffolded to provide the appropriate amount of support, meaningful and usually relevant to real life, creative as opposed to copying language patterns, and provides opportunities for self-reflection.